Hello, everybody. It's Dave Neal, stand-up comic and host of Bachelor Nation News. And the ongoing feud between Nick Viall and Kaitlyn Bristowe continues, and we are here to cover it. Nick responds to what Kaitlyn said, which was essentially that the producers on her season of The Bachelorette were hypersexualizing Nick to her, putting him on a pedestal and possibly trying to brainwash her. Now, what Nick says as a response and what his producers and guests say as a response is just as interesting, but the most interesting part, which we're going to get to on the final clip of this video, is what Nick implies or suggests without saying. So he's leaving a lot up to speculation. We're going to get into it right now. If anyone wants extra content, go over to Bachelor Rush Hour, link in the comment section. My daily podcast keeps getting more and more views every single day. We're building an army over there. I'm giving you extra bonus content, and also patreon.com/Dave Neal for behind the scenes content. I'll give you guys a teaser. This is a set from the world famous Hollywood Improv on Monday night. Just a quick teaser of what kind of content I give you on my Patreon. Have a listen.
I wanted to know what my lady had me saved as in her phone. Her phone was face up. I called it. You should never do that. I called it. It said Dave Comedian, but the comedian was in quotation marks. My New Year's resolution is to perform in the main room one day, but here we are. I've stayed up for 10 years. My career is like coronavirus. It exists and nobody's taking it seriously. That's kills 1% of the time or less. That's where I'm at.
All right, so it was a fun set. By the way, I look pretty good with my wedding ring on there, right? Nice wear the wedding ring as I hold the microphone. So if you want to check out what I do when I'm not making Bachelor videos, you can see that stand-up set on patreon.com/Dave Neal. All right, there's 4 different clips I'm going to play. 3 are from this podcast. 1 is from when Kaitlyn was on Not Skinny, Not Fat earlier this week. Let's have a listen.
Kaitlyn Bristowe has been chatty recently. She's been making some headlines. First, she says that she got ghosted by Chris Harrison after she got the Bachelorette hosting gig. She said that she messaged him 10 times without him responding, and her only intention in doing that was to let him know that he was irreplaceable and she wasn't trying to step on his toes.
10 times?
Apparently.
So she says.
That's a lot. I've reached out to him a couple times.
By the way, they fixed this cord issue that they had here. They got new mic stands, so very nicely done. Let's just get rid of these candles and the backdrop, and we'll be all set.
I think like 2, 3, or 4.
Mm-hmm.
And they were at different times, and it was for various reasons. And he didn't get back to me, but it never felt like a...
blatantly ignoring you.
Yeah.
So Nick says he reached out 3 to 4 times. Chris Harrison never got back to him, and it didn't feel like blatantly being ignored. Whereas Kaitlyn, in the interview with Chris Harrison that they leave out, Chris Harrison says, well, you texted me 10 times, but it wasn't like 10 separate long texts. It was like a misfire, a resend that, no this, asterisk that. So it wasn't like, 10 separate texts.
It felt like, he was going through a crisis, whether of his own doing or not. And it really wasn't about getting a response.
Right. Yeah, no, the way...
But 10.
Yeah, the way that Kaitlyn said this, I listened to the podcast and covered it, is she was very distraught over it. Like, she called Chris her best friend. She said that, like, she spoke about him, that they were very close, and said that she reached out to him 10 times. He wasn't answering. She thought that he hated her. But then, and I have not listened to it yet, so I can't really form an opinion, but now she's on Chris Harrison's podcast. So now this feels a little empty to me, right? Like
Elizabeth, you're a prestigious reporter for Variety. By the way, Elizabeth Wagmeister had a great interview with Colton Underwood, probably the best interview that anyone did with Colton Underwood. But you just said you can't form an opinion if you didn't listen to it, and that's what this whole conversation is going to be about.
Talk all about. Not that
Performative?
I think that people should talk and should make up, and there is room for redemption, of course, but it's like you do a podcast, you get all these headlines, and then guess whose podcast I'm gonna go on.
Yeah, but I don't think Kaitlyn had planned to go on Chris Harrison's podcast. As Kaitlyn Bristowe had mentioned, she had talked about this quote-unquote ghosting in the past. Kaitlyn Bristowe never called it ghosting. The podcast producers who aired the clip called it Chris Harrison ghosted Kaitlyn. So she never used the big old G word there. But of course, after that blows up, which I think she recorded before she went on a retreat. So she recorded that podcast a few weeks ago with Not Skinny But Not Fat. Now, of course, Chris Harrison's like, let's get her on the show. Like, this is hot news. There's nothing sinister about this. There was no pre-planned publicity there. Try to say that fast. Pre-planned publicity.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. It seems a little...
Okay, so in my humble opinion, they're looking for snark where there isn't. But hey, that's what we do here. We watch other people's content and we try to put out fires or start them, depending on what needs to happen.
Whatever.
Am I the one who's... I see where Kaitlyn's coming from in terms of like, I would be so anxious if I was like, this is someone who I feel close to. It's inherently awkward that
Thank you for some pushback. Get her a raise.
I have your job after you exited in a way that was like, not necessarily something you wanted for yourself. Like, I totally see where she's coming from of kind of like needing that, like, wait, hello, like, hi, like.
By the way, I've developed a storyline. I don't know if it's true. If someone could DM me, I've developed a storyline that the two producers don't like each other because they've switched sides and they're kind of like fighting to be like, who's the star producer? It never ends well with multiple producers. Who's in charge? Too many chiefs in the, too many chefs in the kitchen. Is that how it goes?
Just really trying to make sure like we're cool, and to like be like iced out like that. Like, I would also be kind of frantic.
But then you go on a podcast and talk about it.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah,
and then
that was
now
really the
Chris
point.
is willing to respond to you and like have you on a show. Like, but both of them. It's like it's too public.
Yeah, because I told
Your podcast. It's too public. Your whole fan base likes tea, and that's what you have to deliver to print some magazines here.
totally agree with you. With Kaitlyn, I was like, that sucks. Like, why aren't you getting a response? But then 48 hours later, they're like, and look, now we're on another podcast.
I said, she recorded the podcast with Not Skinny But Not Fat several weeks ago because she just went on some long retreat.
Yeah, it's like very PR.
It's not PR.
Yeah, and the episode is called Unghosted.
I can't.
You can. Elizabeth, you can.
Here's what I'll say.
Say it.
Not to give you a compliment, but I will give you a compliment.
Go. Give the guy whose show you're on a compliment.
I think, after your time on The Bachelor, not any secret, you had a lot of fans, you had a lot of not fans. And I think what you've done really well is you've gone out and done your own thing. And yet we're talking about Bachelor today. So
No, objection. Nick, like everybody, lives off of the traffic that comes from having been on the show. We have to acknowledge that, and Nick will acknowledge that. He knows that's not a bad thing. That's where you come from.
of course, you talk about Bachelor, but your podcast is about relationships. You have therapists on. Like, you've formed this really great podcast with your team here. And so far, granted it's new, what we've seen from Chris's podcast is it's just, let's talk about The Bachelor. And I just wonder, is that the whole podcast? Is he just going to continuously try to capitalize off of the show that he left?
Okay, here's the deal. It doesn't take a degree in PR to realize that, yes, the best way for Chris to launch his new podcast is to have as many high-profile Bachelor alumni on it as possible. Let me tell you something. Nobody who's only a fan of Amazing Race gives two flying Fs what Chris Harrison has to say. He's gonna have to get the Bachelor audience on and then wean them off Bachelor and bring them somewhere else. Nick will tell you, Elizabeth.
Or is it that he's going to do something else? I just wonder, does the well run dry at a certain point?
I talked about, when I first started the show, I talked about certainly The Bachelor at times. We didn't recap The Bachelor when I first started the show.
They're literally talking about Bachelor alumni and a Bachelor host.
Sprinkle it.
So Elizabeth is giving Nick a compliment for not talking about The Bachelor while discussing The Bachelor!
And here and there when it made sense.
Losing my
because
mind.
that was an active choice to try to build something outside of it. But certainly, I knew where I came from, so to speak. So
Nick knows where he comes from. He's a smart businessman. You can do one episode a week of Bachelor and then one episode a week of non-Bachelor. You got to feed the beast. That's all he's doing. So he completely understands that, this is the audience, and then bring them to a new notable guest. Clickbait with Bachelor titles. Talk about Chris Harrison a little bit. But Elizabeth, you can't look at what Nick's done over the last 3, 4, 5 years and compare it to what Chris Harrison has done in the last 3, 4, or 5 episodes. It's a brand new podcast. And I'm not here to defend Chris Harrison. It's just the smart thing to do.
you try to find that balance. Yeah, he's going hard to the paint, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Wells and Ben, Kaitlyn. I think those are some of his early guests, and we'll see how it goes. I don't know. I wish him nothing but the best in his podcast endeavors.
Smart from Nick, and I'm sure we'll see him on Chris Harrison's podcast soon.
Yeah. So.
It's certainly making a lot of headlines, so it's
objective complete.
Sure, yeah.
I'm trying to be positive here.
Elizabeth's trying to carry the story, and Nick's not having it. He's like, no, I don't think so. Well, we got 2 more clips to play. It's going to get interesting. If that wasn't the interesting part, and again, I'm not throwing shade at Elizabeth. I think she's really good at what she does. I just think we had producer on the right here sort of pushback, but it's good to have some pushback when it kind of feels like babysitters, not babysitters. It feels like sleepover vibes when everyone's talking trash about someone who's not there, because they're mischaracterizing what actually went down, and they're about to mischaracterize what Kaitlyn said on the podcast. Let's keep listening.
Yeah.
And you're like, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I mean, the headlines. We like getting headlines. It's nice to get.
No, but that's what I mean.
But it's
people are talking
you try to
about it.
find the headlines that have. I find the headlines. I don't love. I hate getting caught up in these types of headlines.
Yeah, look, I mean, here's the deal. It's one of those things. You never want the headline to be about you. You never want the news to be about you. But at the same time, that's what drives the traffic. That's what buys his producers their health insurance. It's what keeps their show going, is being a part of this life cycle. Now, nobody gets criticized more than Nick Viall by other alumni. He's got active beefs with Rachel Recchia, Katie Thurston, Blake Horstman, Kaitlyn Bristowe. The list goes on. But to his credit, that's because he has a successful podcast. Everyone cares what Joe Rogan says because he's the biggest podcaster in the world. When you have something big, people listen to it, they come for you. And when he shares his opinion, it's a little different than, say, if Ivan Hall shared his opinion. No offense to Ivan Hall. All right, so here's where it gets juicy. If you didn't think that was juicy, here it comes. This is how Kaitlyn Bristowe described Nick as on her season, where the producers tried to sexualize him to her.
There was one producer, after I would kiss him, she would come in and wipe my lips and lick her lips and be like, oh, I just want to know what it tastes like to make out with Nick. They really put him on a pedestal to me. That was part of their tactic. I was brainwashed. I'm sorry. Did you not have a relationship before the show, which is the reason that you went on her show? She didn't meet you in this incubator to brainwashed into liking you. She liked you before.
So here's the deal. We have to, in order to fully understand this, we have to listen to what Kaitlyn Bristowe actually said.
I've never even said this. You get the exclusive. One producer actually said to me, after I would kiss him, she'd come and
And by the way, I don't know why they don't play the full audio. They do so much he said, she said. Hey, Nick, producers, I will share with you the simple way to just play audio. There's this button. It's a triangle that's pointing east. And if you just hit the play, it's called the play button. But if you hit that, you can just listen to what they actually said.
Wipe my
vagina,
my lips, and she would swipe my lips and lick her lips and be like, oh, I just want to know what that tastes like to make out with Nick. They really put him on a pedestal to me.
And he was less hot then. That was pre-glow up.
Rude.
And
that was pre-glow up.
And Sean was so good looking. I was always
Sean could get it.
Totally. Yeah, and I was like, oh, well, it's Sean. And then, but that was part of their tactic.
So she talks about her tactic. I cut it off here, but I want to continue it 39:39. So then what was said after that is the part where the producers were trying to brainwash her. She doesn't say that they actually succeeded.
And
that is raunchy.
I know.
Have a listen.
I know.
So you were thinking, so you were basically brainwashed that he's a sexual beast that you need to
Wait, hold on. I want to make sure I get this right. Does Kaitlyn say she was brainwashed? Hold on. Let's just try to listen. They're talking over each other. Hold on. Oh, we lost it there. Hold on 1 second.
Part of the reason I did want to talk about it is I was like, why are we shaming people for this? Or we make fun of virgins, really sexualized.
Blow up.
And Sean was so good looking. And
you were basically brainwashed that he's
okay. So Kaitlyn does say at that point she was basically brainwashed.
A sexual beast that you need to
and he
find out.
And he he was very sexual with me. He really made me feel desired, and he'd Like he was really sexual.
Yeah.
So Kaitlyn starts to spill some tea here, saying he was really sexual. She doesn't blame Nick. She blames the producers for sexualizing him. So it's not like she's admitting she didn't like him before the producers came up. She's just saying the producers made the situation like hot and heavy. So it doesn't, again, it's not, I don't believe the producers of Nick's show are actively trying to mischaracterize what Kaitlyn's saying. It just sounds different with the tone, if you ask me.
Or to like brainwashed into liking you. She liked you before.
So she said she was brainwashed, not brainwashed into liking him.
That.
So what we have here is Kaitlyn telling Not Skinny, Not Fat something. Then we have producer A, responding, slightly tweaking it, just paraphrasing, and then Nick responding to that. I mean, it's a long game of telephone, and Nick's on the ass end of the human centipede.
Because someone asked her, I guess, what my breath smells like, or how I tasted. That from that
she
moment
had no
forward,
opinions herself.
She was incapable of decision making.
Also, that was just so gross. Like that description, I was like, we could.
I'm sure it probably had. I'm sure it was true.
Oh, 100%.
So Nick's probably the most level-headed one here. He goes, yeah, that probably happened.
That's why I'm like, oh God, that's really gross.
What do you...
But
no
because
offense,
of that, you guys had no other connection?
Yeah,
they didn't say that. Objection, Your Honor. Mischaracterization.
It's a bit graphic, but like what...
False equivalency.
Like that's brainwashing?
Almost like, doesn't the show sexualize everyone? Isn't that kind of the point? Like all those like group dates where they're like running around in like salad dressing and shirtless.
Yeah, but a producer going up to Kaitlyn being like, what of his farts smell like is a little different.
Like it feels like,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess she was incapable.
It is interesting though to hear kind of the behind the scenes, because when you're talking about the sexualizing, you're saying what we see on camera, but like, could you imagine? Nick probably could. He was on the show, but like a producer coming up to you and like licking their lips, like that's gross.
No, it is gross. But I don't think that's the only reason they had a connection.
I can picture who it was. I know who it was if it's true, and like I can tell you this person wasn't
right. Like it was probably a joke.
Like
Nick, you don't know. You weren't there. Maybe she was.
Well, there's a little tiny bit more. Kaitlyn on why
Allie
she
really
didn't
enjoys it.
why she didn't text Nick congratulations on his engagement. Apparently she did not text you congrats once the news was announced, and she said he does this whole thing about not texting your ex. So I was like, is this me crossing a line? So that's apparently the reason she didn't reach out.
That doesn't make any sense.
She said
it does make sense, and she didn't say it in such a snarky way.
That you would only invite you.
Why am I turning into the Kaitlyn Bristowe defense fund?
her to his wedding for the headline.
Like, if you want to join the Kaitlyn Bristowe Defense Fund, please join me on Patreon at patreon.com/Dave Neal. I knew this video would be a little bit longer. There's just a lot to get to here, but let's keep going.
But that she would go if she and Jason scored an invite.
Interesting. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I would do it for the headlines.
Apparently. Despite her being on a media
I guess she's
tour.
still a little bit brainwashed,
Yeah.
Oh, we don't like the snark here. Not sitting well with me. Leave a comment. What's going on here?
Yeah, the producer actually asked her.
All Kaitlyn said was, hey, I didn't want to text him. He wrote the book, You Don't Text Your Ex, so I thought I wouldn't text him. They dated, but now he's got another girlfriend, this and that. I think they're upset. Kaitlyn called Nick out for having a young girlfriend. I don't know if they're going to address that. Let's listen.
Say that.
So Nick, the journalist in me, I have to ask a question.
Please,
Are you inviting her to your wedding?
No.
Okay.
Nor would I be invited. Like, we're not.
Well, I feel like you said like you want to keep it like.
Also, she's not my ex.
Oh,
you do. He said this before though. He doesn't view Bachelor things like that as like exes.
Whatever. I think the whole
somebody you had sex with on a TV show. Let's get to the semantics.
thing's kind of dumb.
I also think it's interesting for her to be talking like the show brainwashed me. The producer did this. Da 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 da. And I was like, you were the Bachelorette. You went on to host then the Bachelorette. And when she came on our show, she said that she very much wanted to continue hosting the Bachelorette, specifically the season with 2 of them. She wanted to keep working with them. But then Jesse got all of them. She said she was really hurt by that. And now it's like, well, the show did this, the producers did this, and whatever. And I'm like, I doubt she would be saying this stuff if she was still working for them.
You ever watch a nature show where the moose fights the bear and the moose has its skill and the bear is strong? And you don't know who's going to win because they're both like, alpha, apex predators, because moose will F you up. Nick is the moose and Kaitlyn's the bear, okay? And they're both, where are we going to get I feel like David Attenborough. The moose messed up the bear. They're both taking shots at each other because they're top dogs. They are A+ alumni. They are both the most successful, most lucrative, and best podcast of the alumni. And in these wars, let me tell you something. Kaitlyn Bristowe will respond to these shots that are being fired.
Yeah, it does come off like a tiny bit scorned, which I think is like very human, like to just kind of be like, oh, you don't want me? Well, fuck you. Like, I think that's like a very like human reaction to have, but it does, I think for someone who like started out on the show as like such like a positive, kooky, funny like person, it's this direction just like feels like kind of a departure from like. And
again, not to criticize the producers, I like them. If they were on Kaitlyn's payroll, they would be anti-Nick. Do you know what I mean? They're just they're on the boss's payroll. I get it. He provides health insurance for them, which again I think is a very noble thing. So congrats to Nick for that.
The way that I feel like I was introduced to her and like the vibe I got from her, like based on like the content that she creates, like that feels like it's really coming from the heart. Like this just kind of feels like,
why are we unearthing random stuff?
Here's what I'll say.
Seems to be a lot lately, though. I don't know.
So this is what I was going to say. And I think largely maybe because of Chris's podcast, I think there's a lot of former Bachelor news making its way into headlines. And so I really like Kaitlyn. I don't know her personally at all. Like I've interviewed her 1 or 2 times. I've always really liked her. I actually, I liked a lot of what she said on this recent podcast, but like it's kind of hard to point a finger at any which person, because let's be honest, you included, Nick, love you, but let's be honest, you guys all use The Bachelor for your own benefit.
So thank you, Elizabeth Wagmeister, journalistic integrity. Thank you.
And you say that all the time.
Kind of I don't understand about all this stuff. It's just like
And by the way, you'd be foolish not to, right?
I don't defend the show. I mean,
but that's where it's confusing, because a few minutes ago, Elizabeth says you've moved on, and now she says you use the show. Just like Chris Harrison and Kaitlyn Bristowe, just like they're going to use the show. You can move on. You can be Rachel Lindsay and have moved on and still talk about a show that you are a part of. It's just like, it's the cherry picking that some of my peers seem to do when it's beneficial to them to criticize certain things. And if you're still listening, wake up. Here's where it gets interesting. I tell you who felt really manipulated and brainwashed on Kaitlyn's season. This guy. Whoa.
Who has 2 thumbs and felt brainwashed.
And it wasn't just from producers. And also, as I've pointed out several times, I'm internally grateful for how things played out. And while angry and brainwashed and manipulated in the moment, I have said thank you to people, including Kaitlyn, about how things played out, whether they were deserving of that thank you or not, or whether they had my best intentions in the moment or not. I'm still grateful of all of it. And so, and we covered this when Nick had said in the past the way he was feeling, he felt led on, he felt all these things. And then to Nick's credit, Kaitlyn responded in a way where she didn't hear his quote. She probably read the headline. So she's guilty of it too. But they both are allowed to talk about how they felt from that season. So I just try to look at it from that level and that lens, from like 30,000 feet, rather than today I'm going to play the victim because it serves me well. And but okay, and again, so he's saying he's able to look at it from 30,000 feet, I guess, in an airplane. I guess you go up in an airplane and look down on it. So he's saying he's able to do that, but he's not playing the victim today. That's what Kaitlyn Bristowe's doing. She's not the victim today. She's just talking about her experience. You're both picking scabs and pretending like you're not bleeding. Tomorrow, I'm going to pretend when it's affecting someone else that it's a TV show.
And it's always easy to villainize the edit. Like, it's kind of this built-in scapegoat of the medium of like, yeah, this is like quote unquote a reality TV show, but we all know how heavily curated like the storylines we get are. And so because of that like built-in element of it, you can kind of cherry pick when you want to sort of say, well, you have no idea what goes on behind the scenes, and these are the things that were actually happening, and sort of suit whatever narrative at the moment you're feeling the most, and people can't really fact check you in the same way, and the people who can like don't want to because it was 10 years ago.
Totally. And look, most alums from this show do that, and you're absolutely right. If they called her tomorrow and said, we want you to host, she would be signing that contract immediately. So and that goes to everyone. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Like, this is what this show does, is you talk about it to get headlines and to stay relevant. And it, by the way, kind of going back to our conversation before of like, The Bachelor is dead. Isn't this proof that it's not? Like, people are obsessed with hearing about it and talking about it.
People are invested.
And they're invested. And that's what all the alums in Bachelor Nation know. So talk about it, talk shit on it, praise it when it works for you. It's all this like vicious cycle that's just part of it. And everyone knows it. Like, I don't think Kaitlyn would be offended to hear that we're saying like, oh, you're talking about it because it puts you in the headlines, but you'd also sign a contract to host. Like,
although I would say she would probably be annoyed that you guys are commenting on it without listening to her audio clip.
That makes sense. That's what you should do. You came off of a reality show.
I will
Do
say
your
there
research.
are definitely moments.
Okay, this is it. Last part, last interesting part. It's a long video, but I mean, none of this is worth clipping out. This is really fascinating stuff.
Where I, like...
Okay, so he's hesitating. He's like, do I share the thing I know? What do you know, Nick? Tell us.
Like, when I heard about this headline, I was reminded of a particular story that happened good year and a half after Kaitlyn's season. That involved Kaitlyn and me.
Are you going to
No.
tell us?
No. But it was...
Are you sure?
I was reminded
You're
of
like-
that story, and I remember thinking, that would have been fun to tell. No.
There's a microphone in front of you.
It's just not worth it. And and that's that's the thing. It's just I don't think it's all that big of a deal, but I think it would be made into a huge deal.
My guess, okay, I'm only speculating. My immediate guess was that there was some drunken sexting. That's my guess between him and Kaitlyn. What do you guys think? Holy hell. Nick has just opened the doors for people to speculate about what the hell happened a year and a half after his season of the with Kaitlyn Bristowe had aired. And so much to get to. The cryptic beef continues. I'd love to know your thoughts. I'm going to go straight into the Patreon right now and discuss this even further. Patreon.com/Dave Neal, and also the Bachelor podcast, Bachelor Rush Hour. It's a top 20 in entertainment news. Everyone's been listening, and I appreciate all the support. I'm giving you guys extremely new, very new content on Bachelor Rush Hour that you're not getting on the YouTube channel. The last 2 days, we had interviews with Kate Casey and Reality Steve, and we're going to have so many more people coming on the show to discuss The Bachelor. I appreciate all you guys for listening this long. Wow. Was this as interesting for you guys as it was for me? Let me know what you guys think.